Morning, everyone. Welcome back to Sage Dragon Book Show. I'm your host, Shaquana, giving you great books anywhere that you're listening in the world. If this is your first time on the show, welcome. I host this weekly. I do book reviews and really discussions about great books, ones that are entertaining but also informative and all of that. If you know people that like to read, that are interested in books, please ask them to consider my show. You can find me on YouTube, Sage Dragon Book Show, and I have a lot of different episodes. So today is our Black History Month edition. Happy Black History Month. I hope you all, yesterday was Go Red Day. So that is a day to raise awareness about heart health for the women in our lives, whether it's getting a blood pressure cuff and monitoring your blood pressure or having a heart healthy meal or going on a walk, cuddling with your cuddle buddies, goes on about the self-care. So today I did a fun episode and I really enjoyed curating it. These are books that are about love in different ways, the different ways that we love in the world. But they're all by Black authors. And each of these books, the love was hard. They fought for it, whether it was a friendship or a sibling fighting for the freedom of their brother or their sister, or a marriage that's tested, um, a mother or a father who's really trying to keep their children safe. It's just strong love in its different forms. Next week is Valentine's Day. We do tend to focus on the romantic between partners, and that's beautiful. And I hope people get to enjoy it. I just also um, encourage us to realize that love is, it's flowing in a lot of different directions. I'm reading a really great book on poetry that I found last a couple of weeks ago. I picked it up from Barnes and Noble, and it's called let's see here. I posted it the other day, but it's a book of poems on love, and the poet has different categories too. So, love of self and love of, her romantic partner and her friendships. So, are we ready, producer?
Ready when you are.
Okay, let's keep moving. All watching and listening are welcome to join StreamYard.com 86T5WD4 double IG is the link. So you can join, and we're also streaming this on social media. All right, so let's get into these are 10 reads that celebrate Black love in its many forms. First up, Raising Fences, a Black man's love story. This book has a special place in my heart. It was recommended to me by my friend Angel. I don't know if she's listening yet. Sometimes she joins the show, and I did send her this, but she's a nurse practitioner out of Maryland, so she might not have been able to join. But I used to live in Baltimore, and we were part of a writers group and a poetry group. So we would go and travel and read our poetry on the radio and in cafes. And we would also discuss great books. She said, "You got to read this book." And I remember I have a copy of it. It came out way back in 2002. And so the plot is, or rather, the summary is a profound and heart rending memoir of a man who grew up fatherless in inner city LA, coming to understand as his mother worked overtime to feed him that men were not to be trusted. But as a young man, having already committed petty theft, experimented with sex, and developed a mortal fear of police, Michael still dreamed of having a loving wife and family. This is his dramatic story of faith lost and reclaimed. And it's a memoir. And he talked about like how the Cosby Show, us Gen Xers, that was such a strong image for us, that black family, and that's all he wanted. And that's what this book is about, despite all the systems that were providing him with negative images and experiences of black men. He wanted to push past that, and so it's about his experience in trying to in trying to achieve the American dream, which for him was a black family. And at that time, this is 2002, it was a different kind of book. So I like to, because I've mentioned before, I see a lot of the same books. There's now all of these great channels for promoting authors, and it's needed because it takes a lot to get a book published. But it's it's cool, I think, to also go back in the archives and some of the books that might not have been promoted because we didn't have these channels back in the 2000s. So this is one of the ones that I don't really see a lot of people talking about as much. So if you can find it at the library, it was also interesting because at the time, his wife, I understand they're not together anymore, but she was also an author. She had a really good book too. I used to like. I have all these books in my library. So I'm also want to show this review on Kirkus that I came across. I didn't find any footage on YouTube that I could pull previous reviews or interviews about it. But this is in a review where this person says, pulled a quote where Datcher said, "I've been obsessed with being a husband and a father since I was 7 years old." And he's a poet and journalist now in his 30s at the time. Quiet as it's kept, many young black men have the same obsession. Picket fence dreams, a played out metaphor in the white community, but one still secretly riding the bench in black neighborhoods nationwide. All right, babe. So I'm going to ask you this because you're about the age of this author. Was that a thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hmm. What's a diplomatic way of saying this? Because of the savage inequalities that have plagued a lot of black and urban communities,
Hmm.
um, that was looked at as a source of pride. If you were a boy growing into a man in the 80s and the 90s,
Hmm.
you can put together a family, maintain it, grow your kids, put them through college, see them married. It was a source of pride. It was a source of, you know, determination and perseverance through the problems that plagued your community. And, from a very sourceful place, it was a way of making your community better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
As well as realizing that, you were the man that you grew to be, and you could walk around with a sense of pride.
Hmm. Yeah. And we're watching um Nurse Julia, because I used to hear about it. So I said I just want to watch some of the episodes. So just for light fodder, I've been watching it in the evenings. Now that show stars Diane Carroll, and that's from the 60s. And a lot of people, there were critics of it because it's perceived to have not been realistic. But it's about a woman who Diane Carroll plays it. She's a black nurse, very polished and sophisticated, living in Los Angeles. Her husband was killed in the Vietnam War, so she's a widow, and she's raising her son. So she's a single mother, and she works at an aerospace health facility, and it's a very interracial, it's promoting a lot of integration. Her neighbors are white, her son plays with a little white boy every day, he's his best friend. But pretty much the entire show, the son just wants a father, and it's like that's what he's aspiring to. He's not aspiring to be like it's not even really about a career aspiration. He wants a daddy, and he wants a husband for his mom. So that's interesting too. And I know, as a little girl myself, I used to also dream about being a mom. So I think that was some of what touched me about this book. So check it out. Let me know what you think if you are looking for something really, really, you get a glimpse of his life and what was happening during the time that he was growing up. All right, moving on. The Wilderness. This is a new book. This book came out in 2025. It was very successful. It was long listed for a book award. It's by Angela Flournoy. I hope I'm saying her name correctly. She's a very successful author. She also wrote a book that I enjoy called The Turner House back in 2015 about a Black family living in Detroit, going through, and the book was about like a 40-year span that culminated in 2008 around the housing crisis that was happening, but it also flashes back. And I love me a intergenerational family story. I like those types of books. You get a lot in one book if they're done well. So I was like, she's a great writer. She took her time with this. She said it took her 10 years. But this is her ode to friendship. And it's about these four friends, Desiree, January, Monique, and Nakia, in their early 20s at the beginning of their careers. And then it spans 20 years. It gets through their jobs, their moves. Um, One of them becomes a mother, and then some real scary things happen. It deals with, I don't want to get into spoilers, but it also deals with things that death and dying, the passing of our parents, and the sickness, and how we have to deal with that, and how yet through it all they they fought for their friendships. And so I've heard her on a couple of interviews talk about uh, why she wanted to write a book that centered friendships. And I can appreciate that as someone who has had long lasting friendships and has come from a family that, if they my mother and my uncles and aunts, and if they don't value anything, they value a lot of things, but they are really into maintaining these long term relationships. I'm a little bit in awe sometimes that at how at 70 years old, 60s and 70s, they talk to the people that they grew up with on almost a daily basis. Can anyone out there really say that? Are you really doing that? Like if you're in your 50s or your 40s, or say you're in your 30s now, are you talking to people that you knew when you were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? I really have noticed that this particular generation, and really the people that I, because I know that even amongst all the boomers, this isn't a thing, but I think there's a unique trait with some of the people that I grew up with, with how much they put into keeping tabs on one another. And it has its negatives and positives, but they are very linked. So it there's been a number of there's another book that's coming out by my favorite author. You all know Tayari Jones Ken, and that's coming out in a couple of weeks. That's another book about friendship. And there's this desire now to get more books and dialogue about friendships, in addition to just focusing on the romantic relationships. So there's people who are saying they don't know how to make friends. There's a loneliness epidemic that we keep hearing about. So there's this desire that how do we learn? I was having a conversation with, hey, Terry, who is a friend of mine, and we've known each other for many years. We had lost contact and reconnected, and she said that that's something that she thinks is important and needs more discussion, which is friendship, how to be a friend. She's like, you hear about counseling for marriages and for girlfriends and boyfriends, but you don't always hear resources about how to show up and be a good friend for one another. So that's partly why I wanted to include this in it. I know most of the time when we talk about like Black love, we limit it to the romantic, but I wanted to have it be expanded on. So yeah, I feel like I've been talking so much. So I have a clip that I'd like to show that gives a little more
Yes,
information
though, I
about
mean,
this.
this loneliness has done so much damage. And yeah, that is definitely across communities, right? So watching these women fight for their friendship, and maybe fight is overstating it. I mean, they're all clearly invested in this friendship, which means I got really invested. Yes, I got attached to some people more than others, but I mean, really invested in how this is going to play out. And you give me this sort of classical 3-act structure, right? Which delightful. You give me a landscape that I recognize and a soundtrack that I recognize and clothing moments and pop culture moments without ever. I mean, the music, we get detail in the music, we get detail in some things, but there's a timelessness to what you've done in the wilderness that I'm wondering how deliberate that was or how it just sort of worked out that way.
That's interesting you say that, because I find myself, especially in this novel, like very interested in the present moment, and even in the Turner House, even though there was parts that were in like the 40s, the 1940s. But I think that has to do with like narration, the third, like the sort of gifts that third person gives you.
Right.
And you can have a third person narrator that does not feel like they are from that time, even though they are witnessing people in that time. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
Like the narrator is certainly not one of the girlfriends, not one of their little friends. Like, the narrator is somebody else.
Right.
Not God, but not in the milieu.
Right.
Has access to these people's understanding of milieu, but is not in it. And so I think that's one of the things that can help a novel that is super contemporary. Sometimes, because modern life is cringe, it's like cringely so. But it does not feel like something that in a year, I pray no one will want to read because it's too right now. And I think that has to do with the overarching narrator, the third person narrator.
Yeah. Sula. Toni Morrison and Sula. Beloved is sort of sitting in the background of the Turner House.
Not literally.
No.
It's a different ghost.
Sorry. Didn't mean to make it sound like that. But just in terms of influences. And Sula is sort of sitting in the background here. And I want to spend some time on influences in general, not just Morrison and Sula, but Can we talk about some of the other writers who've helped make you Angela Flournoy, writer that we know now?
Sure. So there's a lot of epigraphs in this book.
Mm-hmm.
I forget how many, but there was a lot of permissions to be gathered, which include Morrison, but also Gil Jones and June Jordan and the poet Wanda Coleman and is that all of them? And Audre Lorde. And so certainly all of those people, but Sula, I think, was, I mean, it's sort of like a classic, like, female friendship, and also, like, there are certainly romantic interests that are part of the book, but, like, the book is about them. Like, the will they or won't they, do they or don't they, it's them. But also, I reread, when I was working on this book, the Women of Brewster Place.
Oh, that really holds up. I read that during lockdown, and it really, really holds up.
What else did I read? Oh, I reread Toni Cade Bambara's The Salt Eaters. You know, it was decades, so I read a lot of things. But particularly thinking about this book, I also am always rereading Edward P. Jones, and I think some of what you say about, like, the narrator feeling like they're out of time has to do with me just always wanting to like Edward P. Jones a thing, to have a narrator who just you feel like is taking care of you in that way. I also, what else did I read? I really loved, when I reread for the first time since it came out, Jennifer Egan's A Visit from the Goon Squad.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Which, it's funny because back then I think it was a moment where people were talking about, like, linked stories, and it was like a gotcha, this isn't really a novel. But it's like, if you can't get, like, there's a chapter, that PowerPoint chapter, that chapter is pointless if you don't read anything else. Like, if you can't get a full sense of the thing.
That clip is from Poured Over, and the discussion that Mira Moose, the host, is having with Angela about, the book. But I really, really enjoyed that book. It's getting a lot of its due. So moving on. So now we flashing back again. The Prisoner's Wife. This is another book from, like, what? Oh my goodness. What year did this come out? 1999. Oh, that was ages ago. And I still have a copy of this book. So, and I remember meeting Asha Bandela. There was a place called the Brooklyn Moon. It was a spoken word place in Brooklyn. And Asha is a writer. She's written for so many magazines, Essence in the day, and she's written several books. And she also did spoken word and poetry. And I remember seeing her at an event, but I've always liked her perspective on things. So this book shook stuff up when it came out in certain circles. A Prisoner's Wife. The background is her memoir tells of her experience meeting, befriending, falling in love with, and marrying a man who was in jail for 20 years to life on the charge of second-degree murder. She meets Rashid while volunteering at the prison, and they strike up a friendship, which eventually blossoms into more. And her words weave together a non-traditional love story that is a reality for many. Her Manhattan upbringing, with its private schools and ballet lessons, prepared her for an idyllic life. However, the taint of a repeated sexual abuse left her scarred and traumatized. And so I really enjoyed this. This was, like, very heartfelt. Asha, she was, as I said, she was, grew up privileged and got to get the best of education. And it was kind of perceived that she would marry well and live happily ever after. And she ended up going and meeting this guy in prison and falling for him and getting married. And then she talks about the journey. the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it in this. And that was a time that it wasn't as we don't things that are talked about now, like respectability and all those things, weren't as clear then. But back then, it also wasn't clear if you had all of these black women going to college, going to the schools, but you weren't empowering or protecting the boys from the prison industrial system. Who are the girls going to marry? Who are they going to partner with? So you started to really see that imbalance, and saw it. I graduated college right around that year, and I remember seeing friends who were looking around and they couldn't find partners because those were the same years that a lot of the men that were our age, or the age that I was at the time, the men were being locked up. So it was hard because they were getting these mixed messages, but no one was really saying, and it wasn't um, a, a method for matching. It was like, fine, you bet you on your own. It wasn't like no one was looking out for the guys and the girls the way that they should have been. We've been just talking about that. So, but it was a really good book. And then I even read after that, she ended up having a baby with her husband, and then wrote a memoir about her daughter, which was so heartfelt. As a mother, I resonated with it because she poured everything into that child, who ended up growing up to become a beautiful young lady. Because I remember every so often I was like, oh, I wonder how they're doing. And I think she ended up, the daughter, going to a great university. I believe she might have even gone to law school or something like that. So I don't know how she's doing at the moment, and whatever happened with Rashid, come to think of it. Now I want to find that out too, because it's been 20 years. So yeah, so that was another good one. I got a great video to show connected to this.
Father, Father, why you let me go?
The title of this new work is Untitled America, and it's set up as a suite of works that will be premiering over a series of time. This first installment, or first chapter, if you will, runs around maybe 6 minutes in length.
Untitled America, a new work, world premiere, by Kyle Abraham, who's a marvelous choreographer. One of the things I like about his work is that it always seems to me to have something to do with social justice, always sort of looking at the issues of the day. That's the foundation of modern dance. And he does it beautifully and unexpectedly.
Untitled America is really looking at the prison system and thinking about the cyclical nature of families that have gone through the prison system in some way.
He did a work for the company previously, and I always knew I wanted to have him back. And so he called me and said that he had an idea. And he said that he wanted to do a 3-part work.
From here, the foot goes off quick. So in 2012, when I made Another Night for the LA Company, it was my first time making work for the company, and it was exciting. But I think one huge shift for me was thinking about the short amount of time that you have to be in a creative process. I think during that time I had 3 weeks and maybe 3 hours a day, which is so different from me taking a year to 2 years to make a work for my company. So as I was setting up for this work and talking to Robert Battle about creating this work, I wanted to figure out the best strategy for being able to have that investigative time. So having time in the studio, creating with the dancers, and then stepping away and being able to process what we did, and then coming back rejuvenated, renewed, and re-inspired in some way.
We don't tend to do that. You come in, you make your work, you make your piece, see ya. But I thought this was an interesting idea.
Really just simpler. So that's been a big part of the process, is trying to figure out the best strategy for doing that. What you'll see this year is a smaller trio that we've created while spending a lot of the other hours that I had allocated working with a larger pool of the dancers in the company and kind of maximizing the additional allotted hours to start generating for what people might see in the summer.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to Alvin, that came from the Alvin Ailey. It was a video. Once again, I was looking for footage about the prisoner's wife, and that's what came up. And this is what I'm saying. Like, you have these amazing books that were written prior to the time we're in now, and it's not a lot of dialogue about it, interviews about it. So that led me to that video. And for a group of people who were so impacted by what these the prison complex, the pipeline, what's going on now, what happened ever since the 70s, it would be interesting to see how the art or the movements for healing. So art and restorative movements. What is that? What is the state of that right now? Because you had the children whose parents were locked up, you had significant others, you had what about the parents? Imagine, being a mother or father and dealing with that. Um, and the film industry, there's movies about it. We've seen so many of them, but there's little nuggets of our humanity that I don't always feel captured in the movies. Maybe because they're trying to do so much with a film. So that dance, um, I thought was kind of touching, but I just think there's room for more artistic expression about this subject. Even in hip hop, currently, with a lot of the now, maybe Ray, you can speak to this more because I don't listen to all of them, but are their albums reflective of what they've experienced? Or is there anyone that's made an album if it happened to their brother, or a song, even if it's not a whole album, but like if their brother was locked up or their father, or you know what I mean? Like the art.
Yeah, Meek Mill
Mm,
has spoke extensively about
yeah.
his experience, and he even started an organization, an advocacy organization
Uh-huh.
for that fights for the rights and justice of people who are incarcerated, and
Hmm.
you know it's a touchy subject because there's a lot that goes on in the prison system,
Yeah.
and being vulnerable with that could mean a lot for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Image wise,
Yeah.
people could revolt against them, both family, friends, and
Yeah.
society. So,
Mhm.
and it's an animal's world in the prison system,
Yeah.
basically. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's like Mouse Utopia in there. You know what I mean? So um, it's a touchy subject, but
Hmm.
yeah, there are Scarface has made songs about it. Willie D has made songs about it.
Hmm.
Uh,
I was also thinking about the perspective of like the people around you, your children, and because that's what the point of this book was. This was her being his wife
mhm.
and traveling and dealing with, not being able to be intimate with him and
Right.
how it affected their relationship. And then, I think about like if you had kids together and then what psychological issues it comes from kids. I remember there was someone that had made some books about it for children, like specifically for like kids who had parents that are incarcerated, as a way to like explain things to them. Yeah, so I'm thinking that's what I mean, like the people that are adjacent to this
Yeah.
and how
There,
they how it
there
affects.
aren't whole songs dedicated to it. I remember when Snoop made Murder Was the Case.
Mhm.
He touched on some things, but it wasn't anything like that in depth.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's like a super vulnerable place to be
Yeah.
for a hip hop artist or a rapper, and it could damage your reputation if you tell too many truths or you too
Yeah.
vulnerable or whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that there's about I think why I like to read books is it seems like it's one of the spaces where there's a little more authenticity because there's so much theatrics with so many other areas
Mhm.
where you're supposed to be there's one trope. So there's one trope even for the prisoner. And
Mhm.
um, there's a whole lot of stuff happening, like you said. So that was a real touching book. That was something that was I remember really liking. Moving on. So the women who raised me, I like memoirs by Black women, and this one I read once again years ago by this woman named Victoria Rao. She's a very famous woman. She was an actress. I don't know if anyone remembers The Young and the Restless, but she played. She had a long run on The Young and the Restless, and she's also like been one of these people who I think she formed her own Black soap opera, but she also had a background. A lot of people may not know that she was a dancer before she became an actress. So I came across her story and I really enjoyed reading it. It's called The Women Who Raised Me. And she was born a ward of the state in Maine. And she grew up the child of a Yankee blue blood mother. That's the way it's described, and a Black Marine. Wilson from South Carolina. Victoria Rao beats the odds that befalls many foster children. And it's the remarkable story of her rise out of the foster care system to attain the American dream. So she talks in the book about like her life in Maine. Her mother had a mental illness and another woman stepped in and raised her and just loved on her. This is when I go through these books, remember I'm talking about love, hard love. This I categorized as love of children, not our own. This was a great demonstration of, sometimes you feel for the kids that are born in the world without parents because you know how, like we keep saying the word vulnerable. They're very vulnerable because you don't know what household they're going to end up in. She was fortunate to grow up with this woman who was a pianist and horticulturist, and she saw something in Victoria. She got her in dance. That led to her getting prestigious opportunities to continue to study to be a ballerina, which is not an easy thing. And she ended up in New York City and so on. So, but there was a lot of nuggets in it. You know, a nugget that was in this, and I still remember this from years later. But she said when she got to New York in her early years, she's trying to hustle and make it. She's like in her 20s. And she had a neighbor woman. I think she said the woman was, oh, I don't remember her nationality, but she's living in New York City. And she said the lady didn't say much to her. But after seeing her in action for a while and how hardworking she was. She said, "You work so hard." She said, "Every year, buy yourself a piece of jewelry." I always thought that was good advice. Like, if you are a hardworking person, to do something really special for yourself every year, because it's just so easy for all of our money to get caught up in bills and maybe other obligations we had. But she told her that, and this woman didn't say much to her, but she was like an older lady. She didn't even think the woman liked her, but she was watching her and she passed that on. So, but yeah, this was a really great great and interesting memoir. I think I have a clip to show.
History of healthcare and mental health care is very important to me to talk about. It's because my mother was a resident at the Augusta Mental Health Institute, and I had the opportunity as an adult to visit this very austere place and to want to participate in understanding that population of people and how we could improve, along with Maria Shriver and the Kennedy family, how we could improve mental health in this nation. The reason why I think it's important to talk about mental health in this particular book is because so many of our foster children are beleaguered with lack of mental health care or not enough. The Annie E. Casey Foundation certainly offers more than most.
What do you want people to know and understand about foster family situations?
Well, I want them to know that they can mentor from wherever they sit or stand, number one. And that anyone, if willing and has the real estate in their heart and their home, can be a mentor or a foster parent. They don't necessarily have to be a full-time foster parent. I want the public to know that they can be a respite caregiver, which is offering a respite to a primary foster parent so that they can rest and recover and take a vacation. I want our listeners to know that they could become a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate, where you train, become licensed, and you can represent children in court. This is a very, very honorable thing to do for a child.
Let me break away from the book for one last question. In her introduction to you, the First Lady said you're a Maine girl. Do you, despite where your career has taken you, do you consider yourself a Maine girl?
Well, actually, I'm going to correct you. Okay. She called me a daughter of Maine. Mm-hmm. And I most definitely consider myself a daughter of Maine. I am a farmer at heart, and I believe that Maine was one of my mothers, clearly. I learned all the rudimentary lessons I needed to go off into life and live life independently and as responsibly as humanly possible, given what I was given in my life. So I owe a great debt of gratitude to the state of Maine.
And part of why I like to read different memoirs of Black women from different backgrounds is that's a state I've never been to. And the work that I do in health tech, we deal with Vermont more so than Maine. Yeah, so I haven't been to Maine yet. I don't know if and when I'll get there, but it's always fascinating to read like about how our experiences are and how unique they may be depending on like what parts of the country and the time periods. And if you read the memoir, you'll understand why she says that, because she spent a lot of time just like in nature, because it was just her. Once she became a foster mother, once she got her foster mother taking care of her, the way that it was set up, she was able to just be outside playing, growing things. And then in that spare time, that's how she stumbled across a book. And for a while, she was learning ballet just by looking at this book and propping it up and doing the movements. And her mother's like, she's good. And then said, I need to get her and figure out a way to get her in dance class. And she did. And just that care, that's, to pay attention and then to take your love for paying attention to a child and figuring out a way to help them cultivate their talent. That's a beautiful gift. And there's a lot of children that don't always get that level of care even if they're not in a family of foster people. So it gave me a lot of things to think about, and it was one of the stories that stuck with me.
Can I add on to that really quick?
Yes.
As a longtime educator, I believe this is one of the reforms that the public school uh, industry should make. I believe that they should do a thorough examination of a child, their attributes, their talents, as well as standardized test them so that they have scholastic aptitude to graduate. Because you want them going on a successful trajectory just as much as you want them to retain the information.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those things are, the proportionality of that in most schools nowadays is really, really poor.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I think a lot of kids graduate and then they're like, what now?
Right.
Because they never really have. Victoria Rouse, she had the people that were vested in her interests. But what if a child doesn't have that? Now
right.
what? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think those things can be added. And it could be, we could expand our guidance departments that way. We can really make the social sciences and the social welfare of our children more developed in that direction, and not just if child is in danger, but you can actually fortify a child. You know what I mean?
I love that. Yeah. It's like a new way of looking at it. It would be like almost evolving their job descriptions.
Correct.
Be less around the policing type of mentality and more about like really empowering the kids and the families, because a lot of the families that do take them in, they might need capacity building too. Like they may need more tools. If you want to be a good foster parent, how do you do that? How do you deal with the trauma and love children and create an environment for them so that they can, that I like that concept. There's a book that I can't remember the title of it, so I'm gonna have to come back at another time. But there is a book that became popular last year that dealt with the American foster system, and it was a national book finalist, and it's on my list to read. But great point, babe. I like what you were saying. It looked like someone came on the screen while we were talking and they said hello, but I don't see them anymore. So hello. Let's move.
Yeah, they wanted us to reach out about the show.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. We'll vet that and check that out. So that's a book for loving children that aren't your own. That example. Now we're moving on to a mother's love for her child with a mental illness. I might have already, I can't remember, but I think I might have already discussed this book. That's okay if I did, because B.B. Moore Campbell, rest in peace, she's a great Black author. She peaked in the 90s and ended up passing away. And her books are also books that, because they were written way back then, I don't see as much talked about in the new landscape, and I think they deserve it. So this is another book that stuck with me. It's called 72-Hour Hold, and it's about a mother. It's like written in modern day, like the 90s in Los Angeles, and Black woman who has a daughter who's beautiful, Trina, and she's getting ready to she's like a senior in high school. All through her elementary and junior high, she was normal. And then when she got in high school, she develops a serious mental illness. She becomes, it's like a combination of bipolar and schizo, really intense. And it just really disrupts their life. I'll just read the description. When Kerry Whitmer's daughter, Trina, a straight A student headed for a prestigious university, suddenly turns impulsive, needy, and irrational, leaving home at all hours to hook up with drug dealers. Carrie is bewildered and frightened. A psychiatrist tells Carrie that Trina suffers from bipolar disorder, an inherited mental illness that can make its victims paranoid, wild, and violent. Carrie's ex husband, Clyde, refuses to accept the diagnosis, and Carrie is on her own and dealing with Trina's unpredictable and dangerous behavior. At times, it seems that the only solution is to have Trina committed to an institution, but since Trina is over 18 years old, Carrie can't sign her in. At a support group for families of the mentally ill, Carrie meets Bethany, whose daughter is even more seriously ill than Trina, and they found a group of experts who engage in illegal interventions in which the patient is forcibly held and treated until stabilized. With her own carefully organized life falling into chaos in the grip of Trina's illness, Carrie is forced to confront the most painful experiences of her past and to heal herself. And that's the plot. So as you can see, doesn't that sound interesting? And it is. It really had me thinking so much about the people who live with, who have children, and they love their kids like we all love our kids. We want the best for them, and they don't. The helplessness that they start to feel when they just don't know how to help them. She tried so hard, and then it was tough because she was divorced. Her ex-husband, he was a good father. He was very engaged, but at the same time, he didn't. To him, he didn't want to. He felt like his daughter was normal because she was so, beautiful, and he just didn't see her in that way. And he didn't. They didn't work the best together because of that, which caused breakdowns. And I mean, Trina would get in her when she was in an episode period. Watch out, a lot of damage. She would destroy the house. She would attack her mother. So I was like, wow, I just felt so much empathy for her. And it was before its time too, because now everybody's talking about mental illness, not so much in the 90s. And as we know, those of you familiar with BB Moore Campbell know that her daughter, Maya Campbell, suffers from mental illness. And so this may have been some of the ways that she, writing this book, was a way for her to address that. So it was a really excellent read. It stretched my heart to have empathy for people who are parents and caregivers of those who have a mental illness. And I have experienced that in my family. So my heart goes out to people who are suffering from mental illness and who are dealing with it, and it was like, also, I like how realistic it was. Like it wasn't just all medical jargon. It was very much about like her. She wanted to live her life. She dated. The mother was still hot in her prime years. And so it showed her. She had a career. She was fashion forward. So I like real stuff, not just feeling like every character is just one dimensional. That's why I like BB Moore Campbell as a writer. So, that was a really good one too.
And then of course she had her famous book, Brothers and Sisters.
Oh yeah, Brothers and Sisters was so good.
Yeah.
The other one,
if you haven't read that one, read that one.
There's also Your Blues Ain't Like Mine, which was basically kind of like the Emmett Till story. And that's one of my faves too. There's only there's one more by her that I haven't read yet. And then I'll be able to say I've read all of her books. We've got a clip to show about her.
Psychiatric facility can hold a mentally ill person against his or her will if that person meets the criteria of a danger to self or a danger to others or gravely disabled. The part of the book I'm going to
let me know if you want me to pause it and you want to comment.
read is right after the daughter, Trina, has had a 72-hour hold. 3 days. It takes 4 to 6 weeks for proper medication to start to work. You do the math. So this is really a Band-Aid for a hemorrhage. And when the mother brings the daughter home, she discovers that all is not well. Looks that way in the beginning, but all is not well. I'm taking my meds again, Trina announced one night, after 2 or 3 days of relative quiet. I just turned off the television in the family room and was about to go to sleep. Trina called to me from her room, which was at the top of the back stairs. Her door was partially opened, and she was lying across her bed. "Did you hear what I said, Mommy?" "Yes, honey." "Come here, Mommy." I went into her room. Trina had picked up all the clothes that she dumped on the floor. The top of her bureau was neatly arranged. Comb and brush here, perfume there. She was wearing jeans and an ironed shirt. When I sat down on the edge of her bed, she threw her arms around me and kissed my cheek. "You're a good mommy," she said, resting her head against my chest. I went to bed, warning myself not to feel better. That would be like Sally Hemings sending out wedding invitations. The next morning, when Trina woke up and came to me with a glass of water and swallowed her pill in front of me, I tried to kickbox the hope that surged through me. Get back. But what's a foot against hope? Trina swallowed medicine, and my day became full of smiles and sunshine. Maybe it's over, I told Maddie. A few days, of course, wouldn't banish mania. It would take weeks for the meds even to begin to be effective. Still, Trina's intent was important. Maddie's own daughter was peaceful, compliant, and living at home. Gloria's son was back at his board and care, once again attempting to be sober and medicated. My friends' children were finally getting it. Why not Trina? What followed were days when my shoulders steadily crept downward and my breath became steady and even. I worked a full day here and there instead of my recent split shifts. The headache that had taken residence above my left eyebrow began to recede. At night, I slept. One afternoon, I went to Orlando's apartment. There was barely any conversation between us. We made love quickly and efficiently. For so long, I'd forbidden myself to want Orlando, the smell of him, the weight of him, his voice when it was low and throaty. But that day, he was my drug of choice, my self-medication. "You ain't fooling nobody," Francis whispered when I returned to the shop. "Look at you just smiling all over your little self. Must have been good." "Mind your business," I said. Throughout the good times and the bad times, Clyde never called me, although I knew he spoke with Trina, not regularly.
That was a clip on YouTube, BB Moore Campbell reading a piece of 72-Hour Hold. Doesn't that sound good? It's good. Trust me. Read that book. You're getting a story of a mother's love. You're getting some friendship. And you're learning a lot about mental health. And man, you know, it was just so realistic because they had formed a parent group, and it was a bunch of parents who had children who were mentally ill, and they were at their wits' end because they felt like all they would get was give them a 72-hour hold, put them in temporarily, medicate them, and then they would come out. And like she was saying, with the medication, she has to wait for it to kick in. That's, hold on a moment. Whoops, did I do that? Sorry. So while you're waiting for it to kick in, dangerous things could happen. So it really opened my eyes to things. I saw that there was something online because I was trying to see how many like other book influencers may have tackled this book, and it's one of the books I don't see a ton talked about. I did see one group did a discussion during Mental Health Month about a year or so ago with it. So I think it's another book where there's room to talk about more. And I also saw where Maya Campbell is trying to get Tyler Perry to make it into a movie. And maybe she'll play the mother. Okay, moving on. So now we are at what number? How many books have we gone through so far? We did Raising Fences 1, Wilderness 2, The Prisoner's Wife 3, Women Who Raised Me 4, 72 Hours 5, number 6, An American Marriage. You know how I feel about T.R.E. Jones. This was a great book, and this particular book got all types of accolades. So I can't say it's underrated because it was an Oprah book selection. Barack Obama, a lot of people have bigged it up, and I didn't even read it right away. And when I finally read it, I was like, yeah, it's very deserving of it. So the plot is about it's a couple, middle class, Black couple, modern, Celestial and Roy. Celestial grew up privileged in Atlanta around, I guess, like the 90s. A lot of times, Tiare, the themes of her books and a lot of the characters is like the post MLK days and all that the people dealing with it, life during those times, good and bad. So Celestial's parents, her father created some invention that made him a millionaire. She grew up very privileged, ended up going to Spelman. She meets Roy. They didn't get together right away, but then they got together later on. And she has her ways about her. He came from a very poor kind of background in Louisiana, but then his mother remarried, and had a beautiful, very, very loving, I'll say, rather than beautiful, very loving marriage. And then the stepfather helped raise Roy, but they wanted him out of there. So he got out of Louisiana because it wasn't nothing there. And he ends up going to Morehouse, getting his degree. I think he got his MBA. And they end up getting married. But there's also a love triangle aspect to it because there's a guy that his friend Andre, who also ends up vying for Celestial. All right, so this is what happened. One day they are traveling home to visit Roy's parents, and Roy ends up getting convicted for a crime he didn't commit. He gets convicted for rape, and he didn't rape this woman. And he goes to jail. And then while he's in jail, all of these issues happen with their marriage. And then it's the aftermath after he gets out of jail. So it says the book explores themes of love, race, justice, and betrayal through the perspectives of the three main characters. So you don't get one point of view. You hear it all through these different point of views, and then you get to form your own opinion about who's right, who's wrong, what would you do in these situations. So it was good. I could see why. I think people, for like different book what's the word? Book clubs may have read it. And I was like, there was times where I was just getting annoyed. I really didn't like Celestial. I didn't like her. And so no one in there was really, really the most likable. I think I felt the most compassion for Roy. But it was really a good book. We have a clip here to show.
Yes.
marriage is complicated
And it
messy.
involves a lot of things. But yeah, and that is the thing with Big Roy and Olive. Everyone's like, that was true love. But it also involved a woman organizing her entire life around her husband and son. She has no subplot.
No, she doesn't. Oh,
No,
wow, she definitely
that's
does
all
not.
she does. But people read it and they're just like, oh my God, that was so beautiful. And as a person, I want a subplot.
There's so much humor in this book. I mean, Big Roy, I'm just thinking of this conversation that Big Roy has with Andre, which, I mean, it's a very somber, serious topic, and yet at the same time, he's really funny, and he's dad in a Barca lounger,
Yes.
lecturing this upstart, saying, well, you're not thinking about my kid.
Yeah,
You're not thinking about my kid. You are being selfish, and you're not thinking about my kid. And yet, I mean, there's jokes about not paying the phone bill and things of, I can't cook, my wife is gone. And it's a really gentle way of taking on a really difficult subject.
Also, I think that life is funny. Everyone's life is funny. I feel that if I were not to have included the humor in this book, I would be depriving the characters of their humanity.
Absolutely.
And people are more than their problems, And it's just kind of funny. Like, if you're in prison, that's not funny. You're wrongfully incarcerated, even less funny. You have a cellmate that is really attached to you, and he lets you know that he likes to be addressed as the ghetto Yoda. And when you call him the country Yoda, he gets offended. He's like, I'm not the country Yoda, I'm the ghetto Yoda. That's funny. Mm-hmm. And it's in prison. It's still funny. And I feel like life is just kind of funny. Andre's father is funny. Celestial's father, when he's setting out the Christmas decorations and he only wants the black wise men. So he buys 3 boxes of wise men and takes the black one out of each box. That's funny. And that's something my own father would do. So I feel like I just had to be open to the mirth of this situation. And also, it's just a gift to your reader, man. No reader wants to be in it for the slog. You want the
eyes. We would all have just been sort of rocking ourselves.
It gives the writer a chance to breathe too. Mm-hmm. It gives me a chance because my personality is, I have kind of a busy, kind of a flashing light personality in many ways. And with this topic, I did have to kind of restrain myself in it. And so the humor also allowed me to just play around and be myself.
Well, and there is...
Okay, we could stop there. You can hear that poured over. I know I stay Barnes & Noble. I love that particular podcast because the interviewer asks really good questions of the author. But man, if I wish I could tell y'all what she meant, because it would be, it would be a spoiler if I went into like the joke of it all. But that's the thing. Like when I read, I like to read stuff that's just well written. And so authors that know how to write stuff that is like that was a dark thing. Like he did not rape that woman. And then he got 5, he had like 10 years. And then I think he had a lawyer, Celestial's father, the whole time was paying for his, his lawyer to try to get him out of this. But it was like details of it that was really good. So it's about fighting. It's about fighting for you, what you believe in. When he got out, he wanted to fight for his wife. He wanted to fight for his marriage. And then it was about like her fighting for what she believed in and things like that. So life ain't easy. You got to fight for love. Love, I get it. So I think that's why I really was into this book. All right, moving on. Next up, The Reformatory. The love of a brother and sister surviving through the most harrowing of times. And I have this book in my Audible, and I was shook to listen to it. Like I knew it was gonna be hard to listen to, and here's why. So here's the plot. Gracetown, Florida, June 1950. It's fiction, but you're going to hear in a minute because I have a clip how it's based on true events somewhat. 12-year-old Roby is sentenced to 6 months at the Gracetown School for Boys, a reformatory, for kicking the son of the largest landowner in town in defense of his older sister, Gloria. So begins Roby's journey further into the terrors of the Jim Crow South and the very real horror of the school they call the reformatory. So it's set in the 50s, and it's this brother and sister living in this town in Florida. Discrimination is at its height. And he's basically just standing up for his sister by the like the teenage boy made an advance at his sister. He went and fought the boy and got arrested and put into this reformatory, which this particular school, it was a real school in that part of Florida that was around for years, called the Dozier School for Boys, and horrible things happened there. So in this, Roby has a talent for seeing ghosts or haints. You know, that was a thing that they used to call it. But what was once a comfort to him after the loss of his mother has become a window to the truth of what happens at the reformatory. Boys forced to work to remediate their so-called crimes have gone missing, but the haints Roby sees hint at worse things. The reformatory is a hallucinatory, haunting, terrifying, and moving work of historical fiction written as only Tananarive could. She's another one of my favorite authors. I've read not all of her stuff yet, but I read a lot of her books. And she writes in the horror genre. And one thing I've heard her say a lot is that in a way, writing horror gives her comfort. It's the way that she writes it. And a lot of it is real things that have happened on the American soil, not these goblins and goblins, but real life horrors. And the reason why you're like, well, what the heck does this have to do with love? It's the way that Roby and Gloria rally for each other through it. Brother and sister, they were all they had. They were abandoned. And that is the story here. So this book, I like to see when a book gets such acclaim and from different audiences. All types of people really have bigged this book up. So read this or listen to it in audio form and let me know if you come back. I have this clip here that shows a great photo of the author, and I just included a little clip of what inspired you to write it. She said soon after her mother died in 2013, she learned that she had an uncle named Robert Stevens who died at the Dozier School for Boys. And later her father, husband, and her son went to the school. And there's an area in the school cemetery where they were, like I said, this really was a school, and they buried all these people, and they called it Boot Hill. And this was her way of paying homage to her uncle, who actually died at this real school in Florida, this notorious vicious school. So this is an excellent book. It's another one of the ones that I think more people should read. Babe, can we show the clip that we have here?
Passed away. I actually lived in Atlanta and taught at Spelman College for 3 years because my mother was ill. And soon after she passed away in 2013, our family learned that she had an uncle who died at the Dozier School for Boys in Marianna, Florida. We got a call from the Florida State Attorney General's office. They explained that researchers from the University of South Florida were going to go and begin exhuming because this facility, which was opened between about 1900 and 2011, was fraught with complaints from the time it opened. But my thesis is it was too big to fail. in this town. It was too big a piece of the economy, much like our criminal justice system as a whole today. And as a result of that, several children died there. And so many children died there, there was a graveyard in the woods they called Boot Hill, but they didn't mark the graves. They just buried the bodies out there. And from the very first, when my dad and I went to the very first meeting, Dr. Erin Kimmerly was there. She has a book out now this year. I think it's called We Carry These Bones, which I admit I have not read yet because, and you'll see why when I tell you this next anecdote. But in any case, we went out to the school. There were survivors there, black and white, and that was it because it was a segregated facility, the black side and the white side. But one thing that everybody had in common was what they called the White House. And I think that's probably a depiction of the White House on the cover.
Let me know if you want me to stop it. It's a pretty long video.
I called it the Fun House in my book because I have a sick imagination. But the beatings were so severe that one of the survivors told me that he had to miss visiting day with his parents because he was in the infirmary because the doctor had to literally extract fabric from the wounds. These are children. So after hearing these stories, I knew I wanted to write about it. But having written a nonfiction memoir with my late mother, I was not that attracted to the idea of memoir. It's hard. I mean, I was a journalist for 10 years, so you would think I would jump, but I'm a novelist. If I could have written my mother's book as fiction, she wouldn't let me, but if I could have, I would have. That's how much I'm a novelist. So I decided, let me write a novel where I'll honor this young man, Robert Stevens, who unfortunately in 1937 did die at the Dozier School. They did find his remains, and they were reburied, I think, in 2015, while I was still laboring over this book.
So we can stop there.
But I wanted to write it in a soft...
For showing it, and I didn't really even get the chance to listen to that whole interview but honestly, I will. I don't always listen to everything, but in full, but that seems worth my attention currency because I really, like I said, I love her writing. She's a great technical writer, and she uses horror in a way to make the story softer. So that, as you can see, a very difficult subject matter based on a real school that happened that disproportionately exploited Black boys, and they didn't even close it until, when did that school close? It wasn't like ancient long ago. I can't remember the, let's see. Do you remember Dozier School? I was going to try to see if I could find out when the school closed. But yeah, it's another dark aspect of American history. Let's see here. Florida School for the Boys, 2011. So that's really not that long ago if you think about it. Vicious Place, 111-year history in America. And it gained its reputation for abuse, beatings, rapes, torture, and even murder. So I'm surprised even more books aren't out about it. Like, you had this one, and but I'm thinking that even more needs to be. I mean, maybe not. But that was that's a really good book, and just check her out as an author if you haven't read any of her stuff. You know where I started with Tanana, and it's a very fun place to start. Her and her husband Stephen Barnes is also an author. The two of them collaborated with Blair Underwood on these books called Tennessee Hardwick, and they're like these really sexy mystery novels. They wrote like 5 of them about this man who's like a actor, but he also solves mysteries, but they're well written and they're interesting and they take place in different places. One of them is in like Miami, one of them is in Johannesburg, South Africa. And because they're good writers, they interweave different social issues going on, but you don't feel like you're being lectured. It's really, really, like I said, they're sexy. So check those books out. And I really wish they would make more of those in Audible. They only have one in Audible, but hopefully they'll get them all down there. But she's an excellent writer too. Okay, I think we only got two more to go. All right, so next up is Elin Harris, Just As I Am. And I read a lot of Elin Harris books. He came out in the he came out in the 90s, late 90s. And at the time, he represented for gay men, Black gay men. And he was trying to help increase people's empathy around men who were LGBTQ. But he also, what I was touched by, having been someone, I've talked about this a lot, but a lot of us that grew up in the 80s, we were introduced to HIV and AIDS in a terrible way. They scared the shit out of us. So, I mean, they scared the shit out of us. And did I tell you they scared us? We were just scared to have sex, be in a relationship. And the way that HIV and AIDS was presented was like a punishment. If you do this, you're going to end up with this. I don't think that was a real healthy way of talking about a virus. And it did have a disproportional effect on Black men and women during this time. So this is the stuff that he was talking about in his books. And they were spicy and fun, sad, and I read them all. I read all his books, Just As I Am, Invisible Life. I think that was the first one. But he blends romantic storytelling, contemporary issues, bisexuality, and things like that. So I have a clip I'd like to show.
Give me a sec.
Yeah, so he's no longer with us. He passed away some years ago. And this particular book.
Could you take our picture?
I had spent about 12 years in the computer field, working for companies like IBM, Hewlett Packard, and AT&T. I quit my job basically, and when I finished the manuscript, I started to submit it to publishers, both large and small, black and white, and gay and straight, and the manuscript was summarily rejected by every publisher that I'd sent it to. So I self-published it and started peddling it wherever people were, in beauty shops, barber shops, sorority conventions, black expos, and what have you. And that's kind of how the whole thing got started.
I just think that's a brilliant, strategy. Go to where the women are, the women who read and all that, and get people talking.
One of our sales reps in that area heard about this amazing guy who was selling copies of his book in the back of his trunk of a car to all these hairdressing establishments in Atlanta. Brought it to the attention of one of our then editors.
I called him and I told him who I was, and he said, "You're John Grisham's publisher, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, we are." And he said, "Nothing would make me happier than to be working with John Grisham's publisher, because that's what I want to be."
Harris didn't know he wanted to be a writer until some of his friends started dying from AIDS.
When I was losing a lot of friends to AIDS, I would write them letters, and these would be long little letters about how we met and some of the good times in our lives, because quite frankly, I didn't want them to leave here without knowing what their friendship meant to me. And one of my friends, in his final days, he called me to visit, and we went to visit, and he told me how much those letters meant to him, and said that I had a gift for writing. And he said, you should write, you should tell our stories. Now, when someone's on their deathbed, you make promises that you don't know how you're going to be able to keep. But a year and a half later, I started Invisible Life.
Invisible Life, the book that Harris first peddled from the back of his car, was eventually picked up by Doubleday and is now in its 40th printing.
Invisible Life was the start of the one-day reads of E. Helen Harris books. Whenever Invisible Life came out, I was like, is he gay?
Harris's devoted female readership can be credited for his unprecedented rise to success. From IBM sales executive to literary superstar, an ascension which has become a publishing industry legend.
You want me to stop there?
Yeah, so that's you know, so he was very instrumental in talking a lot about, like I said, people who were infected, Black men who were affected with HIV and AIDS, and what that was like. And that's, once again, another area that I think needs more stories about, because you just don't hear or see it touched as much anymore. And it's still, out there. People are still getting infected with it. All right, moving on. I'm sorry, y'all. I got a cold, so I'm powering through this. Moving on. We're almost there. 9. Black Girl Lost by Donald Goines. Donald Goines is like, what they say, the godfather of Black pulp fiction and one of the most revolutionary writers of the 20th century. Wow. The classic tale of a woman living in the ghetto without any rules. Now, he writes street crime. So, like, I feel like, when you look at those 50 Cent movies, or rather, not movies, but his shows, you gotta give props to Donald Goines, because he laid the foundation for that. And I haven't read, he's got a lot of books. I haven't read them all. But I read this Black Girl Lost last year. And I actually listened to it. It was another one that I listened to. And I have to agree with, there was a review about it. It's a short book. You can listen to it in like a few hours. There's so much heart. It's about a girl who grew up, she's had a really bad family situation, and she ends up with this guy named Chink. And it's like the two of them against the world. So much heart in it. I'm not saying I want to celebrate this type of life. Hell no, I don't want to see anyone of our people, any of our girls, any of our boys living like this. But there are people who write about it because one form of artistry is documenting, it's witnessing, it's bearing witness. I want this done. I don't want us living these type of realities, but we know we live different realities in the world. But yeah, it's just a lot of heart is the best way to say it. So these two were in love. This guy Chink, he was a criminal though, but he finally gave Sandra some love and some security. So that's what the plot of it is about. And if you like street and urban, and you want something good, read Black Girl Lost. You got any ones you like by Donald Goines, babe?
That's the famous one. He has so many. Mm-hmm. I think I might have read about 3 of them. Mm-hmm. His writing is just like, at a time when, when you're growing up and you just want something to relate to, something that's like familiar, you lean in that direction, the Iceberg Slims. Yeah. And the Donald Goines, so that you can have something to relate to, growing up in New York, that sort of thing. You can relate to a lot of the, it's a good form of reference and familiar for you, Yeah, exactly. So so that was a good one. That was some love. I put that song with when I was listening to the book, it just made me think of that. There's a song with Beyonce and Jay-Z. It was on their Carter album, and it was real popular. Nas has a Black Girl Lost song too.
Yeah, he does. That's true.
Yeah, JoJo from Jodeci sings the hook.
Yeah. I think I did a playlist for this, and I think I put Nas's on there and the Beyonce and Jay-Z on it. It's good. I would say they should make a film about it, but
they Ben should have made a film about that.
But I just don't want it. I don't know. It just needs to be good. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. We'll see. Because it's got some heart to it. Some people will be like, well, how many of these kind of stories do we need? True, but it's just how you do it. All right. Last but not least, we're ending on a beautiful note. The Pact. Y'all probably have heard of this book. This isn't a new book. The three young men make a promise and fulfill a dream. So you guys might remember this. I think this was around the time of the Obama years. There were a lot of books around that time of a similar theme. I kind of recall these, they were like books like this. There was The Pact. There was another one called The Other Wes Moore. It was written by Wes Moore, who's now the governor of Maryland. But at the time he was, I think he might have been doing not-for-profit work. There was a series of books by this, remember Hill Harper? He was writing a lot of those type of letters to young brothers and letters to young sisters. So it was all these books around that time. And they were all like pull yourself up kind of books.
Motivational,
yeah. So this was one of them that got a lot of success, and it was based on a true story. Three brothers living in Newark, New Jersey. They made a pact in high school that they were gonna all become doctors, and they did it. And so it tells their story of how they got from high school to college, from college to med school, from med school to doctors, step by step, and how they helped one another. So that's like, wow, because if you think about it, a lot of times you hear this narrative that people shouldn't be around. Like if you're trying to be successful, you need to leave the people around you. And there's a school of thought for that. I remember in Jack and Jill, one of the fathers who's a professor, Jeff at U of R, telling us that he was involved with this program called the Posse, which was a educational initiative that was like doing what the Pact did. It was making sure that, like, if, say, you got a senior now that's promising, you won't just take them and accept them into college. You accept them and their friends, and you create an environment for all of them to be successful. And it was some kind of experiment. I don't know what became of that. I want to try to find out. Maybe I can contact him and ask him, because that was like a good 10, 12 years ago when they were funding that. A lot of that is probably all gutted now with them destroying, DEI funding anyway. But it's interesting because this shows that it can work. There's a school of thought that you leave your friends behind and you leave the elements behind. But they felt that because they knew what each of them needed, that it could be successful. So let's show that clip, please.
Certified emergency medicine physician. I'm Dr. Ramik Hunt. I'm a board certified internal medicine physician and a board certified obesity medicine specialist.
My name is Dr. George Jenkins. I treat patients at school-based sites in Washington Heights and the Bronx.
They're known as the doctors, lifelong friends who have won awards for their dedication to giving back to their communities. Work they vowed to do when they were growing up as teenagers in Newark, New Jersey.
Dealing with not having money, trying to survive in an environment where it was tough to survive.
So Samson, Ramik, and George made a pact to all become doctors and to support each other along the way. A promise they kept through college and med school, and after 30 years, one they still honor today.
I enjoy being on the front lines, helping people and to nurture them back to health, and to be able to sometimes step in and intervene and save a life is such a tremendous blessing.
Oh, and it's a blessing to have them on the show. Doctors Sampson Davis, Ramik Hunt, and George Jenkins, all with us. Hello, doctors. I feel so blessed to have you guys here.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. George, let me start with you. So this was a promise made in high school. How did it even come up in conversation? 3 high school guys making this pledge to each other?
It was pretty organic, to be honest. We didn't really think about it. We were just trying to find our way. Regular young guys, we love sneakers, we love video games, we love girls. We just, sometimes we found ourselves just being mischievous as well, but just trying to find our way growing up in Newark. A lot of our teachers in various stages of our development prior to us meeting told us that we were smart, told us that education was the surest way to change our quality of life and our situation. So we sort of around those formative years, around sophomore, junior year, we started to begin thinking of what we wanted to become. And everyone had their sort of separate ideas of what their futures look like. And then we happened to stumble into and literally stumble into a session from Seton Hall University about careers in health and science called Pre-Medical Pre-Dental Plus program, which was an EOF program. And we just all looked at it together. And once we decided to go for it together, it was like unsaid that we were going to support each other emotionally. Wow. Just really learn from each other. We taught each other so much about being men. All of us come from single parent homes. So we taught each other how to shave, how to tie ties, just how to present professionally.
That is amazing. I mean, it was like you were meant to be. Now, Ramik, I know though, at first you guys all went to Seton Hall, which is phenomenal in itself. But Ramik, at first, you thought about going to Howard and you considered being a teacher. Did the other two wrangle you back in and say, no, we promised, so you got to keep your promise?
You know, that was so interesting. We, I was going to go to Howard with 2 of my other friends. And when this opportunity came about, I just kind of weighed my options and realized that doing this with them was the surest way to get me out of my situation. And because it was all for one for all. And I knew that if I went this way, it would definitely change my life. And so I just went for it.
So Sampson, it's one thing to set a goal with your friends. Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to become.
And if anyone wants to check that out, you can, look at the rest of the interview. But you see the point. They stuck together. I have got to ask you, you're an educator. You I think we are of a similar age range as these men. What do you think about this kind of stuff? Do you think there's something to this? Because, I mean, I could see how this could have not worked. And it's great. Like, this story gets a lot of attention. I think they might have even made it into a movie, or I heard they're gonna, or they did. What do you think about this concept? You think this is replicable? Should it be replicated?
Oh, it should, and it was, and it's been successful for decades. So you have, shout out to Minisync and the programs that they run down there, which are very similar. Shout out to Upward Bound and some of the programs that they run, or I don't know if Upward Bound is still being funded across the country. And a shout out to the NOLA program and, Dean Smith, a lot of the young men and young women that went into those programs found a brotherhood and a sisterhood with the people that they either went into it with people that they were very friends with or tight with, or they met people there that they found, very, precious things in common. And then they vowed to get each other through school and to get each other through their circumstances. So yes, and I think it's the way to go in a lot of ways. I think that they should do this for high school kids. I think this is a formula that works, and it should be replicated on all levels of education, in my opinion.
Now, you know what it seems like nowadays is a barrier? It seems like we're in a more individualistic time. I'll give an example. I'm even thinking about simple things like a lot of times during all three of those kids were like in poverty or they were all in single households. So they formed that bond, right? Well, nowadays, like let's say I was picking my kid up from school. It's less likely that I'm not saying I would do this, but I'm just giving I'm seeing how it normally is. Someone picks up their kid from school, they're not picking up the two or three kids to ride together to talk to one another. I'm picking my kid up, taking my kid to basketball practice. You pick your kid up, you pick your kid up. It feels less like it's an environment for that. I have an individual path, you have an individual path. It feels less like how it was when, and then if you don't have those programs anymore, like you did when you had the HEOPs and the NOAAs, C steps and Upward Bound, and I mean, are all of those programs now eliminated because they all are considered DEI?
I would have to check on that, but I know they struggle.
Yeah.
If they're not eliminated, they struggle, but they're definitely needed, and you know,
Yeah.
it warrants replicating for the success of our young people. Now, what you just mentioned about the kind of isolationism that's going on with that, back then, you had a lot of latchkey children.
Yeah.
So if you paired up and you bonded with your group, and your group helped you to navigate those troubled waters, and as you're developing in education, that kept you on a straight and narrow. Nowadays, like you say, yeah, a lot of kids are car to door, so it's a little different. But if we as people focused more on the ethic of what we're talking about
Mhm.
instead of the isolationism, then we would
Yeah.
kind of foster more community.
Yeah.
It would foster more community. It would make our brothers and sisters and neighborhood people problems our problems as
Yeah.
we try to move along and be better as a community.
And the thing with this is this was not a program. This were three kids that were
Yeah.
friends. And that was partly why I
Mhm.
included it on here. Because once
Yeah.
again, we're talking about love. And
Yeah.
this was a form of love from three guys that was like, no, we are all gonna be doctors. And
Yeah.
we are
When
gonna
you
and they
when,
changed their destiny.
when you brought this up,
Yeah.
the counterculture opposite of something like this would be the movie we did. We just watched Juice, and we know that that's like a cult classic. And you saw four friends who, if they didn't have the nurturing and development that they needed, and you saw the way that they went. And
Right.
they were a tight bunch, but all of the all of the savage inequalities ate away at their friendship,
Mhm.
and then they wound up some of them dying, some it was just chaotic. So
Yeah. Killing
you know,
each other.
yeah,
Hating
we
each
saw
other.
we see the two extremes that exist. We just want to make it more consistent so it's replicatable and it could develop our people more. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I saw something online where I think they're doing a young man that I'm Facebook friends with. They're doing some type of like celebration of that book, and they're gonna bring in a bunch of here in Rochester, screen it and talk about mentoring things like that. So I'm glad people are still paying attention to it. But I just love the brotherhood that it represented. So there you have it. 10 books that are great books for you to read during you know, anytime, not just Black History Month. But I'm using Black History Month as an excuse to just say you looking for some books, you want to get a peek into the Black experience and look at it from different angles, check out some of these authors, check out some of these books. And we are getting ready to wrap. I hope you all have a great rest of your weekend, and we will see you next week with some more Black history content. Have a great week.